Good morning, everyone. It is now 10 a.m. Eastern, so we'll begin this meeting of the North American Numbering Council. My name is Christy Schumann. I am the designated federal officer of the NANC, and I thank you all for joining us today. Today's meeting is online only. We welcome members joining us on Microsoft Teams. Chairwoman Charles, I now turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, Christy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's NANC meeting. We especially want to welcome our council members that are in the Pacific time zone. This is an earlier than normal start for us. We have a busy agenda today with reports from 3 of our NANC working groups. These reports are working group draft prepared for deliberation by the NANC, and we will vote on whether to adopt each one as a final report and recommendation of the North American Numbering Council. We are looking forward to these interesting and important presentations. This meeting is being held via Microsoft Teams. We welcome members of the public watching via live stream and encourage you to submit any questions to the email address livequestions@fcc.gov. Your questions will be read during the public participation portion of the meeting. Before we begin, I will review some ground rules and best practices for council members to ensure we have a smooth and successful meeting. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. Please use the video function only when you are speaking. This meeting is fully remote, so keeping your cameras off will facilitate broadcast of the meeting. If you have a question or would like to make a comment during designated discussion times, please use the raise hand feature. When you are speaking, please identify yourself as we may not recognize your voice. We will have an opportunity for public comment near the end of the meeting. Does anyone have any questions before we proceed? Now for announcements. First, we have several council member announcements. First, earlier this summer, Mike Ripperger retired, and I apologize for that, retired from the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. Brady Tolson continues to represent New Mexico on the council. We thank Mike for his service on the council and wish him well on his retirement. Next, we'd like to welcome a new council member. Sharon Pistachio of Verizon joined the council earlier this fall as Verizon's alternative representative. She joins Dinah Adams, who is now Verizon's primary representative on the council. This change occurs as Dana Crandall retires from Verizon. I'd like to focus on Dana for a moment. Dana is a long-time contributor to the NANC, having served on the council since 2019 and on various NANC working groups since 2010. We thank Dana for her dedication and her significant contributions to numbering policy over many years, and we wish her well in her retirement. Second, we have a full agenda today with 3 routine updates and 4 reports from our remaining working groups. We'd like to thank all of the working group members and co-chairs for their work on these reports and throughout the year. We would like to recognize the work of the Call Authentication Trust Anchor, the CATA working group. The CATA working group will present 2 reports this morning. We want to acknowledge the work of all the CATA working group members, and we especially appreciate the leadership of the co-chairs, Jackie Wallingamuth and Linda Vanderloop. We would also like to recognize the work of the Internet of Things Numbering Usage Working Group. The report of the IoT Working Group will present, the report that the IoT Working Group will present will be the successful completion of all issues referred to it. We want to acknowledge the work of all the IoT Working Group members, and we especially appreciate the leadership of the co-chairs, Susan Gately and Rich Shockey. We will also have an update and a report from the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. And of course, the NAOWG's oversight responsibilities always continue, but it reports will complete its work on the direct access referral. We thank the NAOWG members for their work on this report and throughout this year. And we'd like to acknowledge the leadership of the three co-chairs, Phil Lindsay, Karen Rippin-Kroger, and Laura Howley Walt. Now I'll turn the meeting back over to DFO Christy Schumann, who will conduct the roll call. If any council member has any ethics disclosure to make to the group, please do so when your name is called, and thank you.
Okay, next up is the roll call. Chairwoman Charles is on. Next is Highline.
Good morning, everyone. Bridget's here.
Welcome, Vice Chairwoman. 10X People.
Summary here. Good morning.
800 Response Information Services.
Good morning, Heather Barrows here.
Ad Hoc Telecommunication Users Committee.
Good morning, Susan Gately.
Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions.
Jackie Walgemuth, good morning.
AT&T.
Angela DeMay, good morning.
Bandwidth.
Greg Rogers is on as well.
Right.
And Lisa Jill Freeman, and I need to disclose that I represent Bandwidth on the NAPM LLC.
Okay, thank you. Brightspeed.
Hello, this is Jeff Lanning, no disclosures.
Charter Communications.
Glenn Klepper is on, and I would like to disclose that I represent NCTA on the STIGA.
Did I see Kathy on too?
Kathy is here as well.
Okay. Comcast Corporation. Comcast. Competitive Carriers Association.
Good morning, Angela Simpson's on for CCA.
Welcome. CTIA.
Good morning. This is Courtney Tallarico. I'm the alternate who will be representing CTIA today.
Okay, thank you. Electronic Privacy Information Center. EPIC. Chris, are you on today? Google? Do we have anyone on for Google? Encompass?
Yeah, hi, it's Chris Shipley from Encompass. No disclosures.
Welcome. Lumen?
Phil Lindsay, good morning.
Maine Public Utilities Commission?
Yes, good morning. This is Michael Johnson.
National Association of Attorneys General?
This is Tracy Nayer from the North Carolina Department of Justice on behalf of NAG. Thanks.
National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates?
Good morning, Barrett Sheridan is on.
New Mexico Public Regulation Commission?
Yep, Brady Tollison is here.
North Dakota Public Service Commission? North Dakota Public Service Commission? NTCA?
This is Brian Ford with NTCA.
Peerless Network?
Birch Bodyfelt here.
Public Service Commission of District of Columbia?
Hello, Lara Howley Walt here.
Finch Voice?
Good morning, Allison Blevins.
SIP Forum?
Rich Shockey, nothing to disclose.
BS Telecommunications?
Paula Jedlow is here. Good morning.
Morning. Telnix?
David Kasem here. Happy holidays, everyone.
T-Mobile?
Scott Fardymuth is on.
Rosemary Leist, and I disclose that I'm a member of the NAPM LLC.
US Telecom,
Josh Perkey is on, and I'll disclose I'm the executive director of the Industry Traceback Group.
Verizon,
Good morning, Diane Adams.
Vonage,
Good morning. This is Michael Ortega. I have no disclosures.
and then for our non-voting members, iConnective,
Chris Drake here.
And Kathy McMahon, no disclosures.
Somos.
Joel Bernstein, I'm joined by Flo Weber.
That's everybody. Did I miss anyone or did anyone join late? Okay, that concludes the roll call. I turn the meeting back to the chairwoman.
Thanks, Christy. For our first presentation, we'll hear an update from Deb Tucker, co-chair of the North American Portability Management. Deb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman Charles, and good morning, everyone. My name is Deb Tucker, and I work for Verizon. I am one of the co-chairs of the NAPM LLC, and I share that role with Teresa Patton with AT&T. To go into our report for our statements of work and contract amendments, Amendment 42 was approved for implementation of the annual data access charge for PTRS users in 2025. If anyone would like to understand more about that, there was a communication that was sent to the PTRS users on November 21st, and questions can be resolved through that communication review. For our NPAC activity and releases, Release 5.2.1 is planned for deployment to all regions on February 2nd, 2025. This will include changes for SOW 39, SOW 40, and Amendment 41. Those cover change orders 565, 566, and an amendment for the WDNC for VoIP. The testbed will be available by mid-January 2025, and announcements were sent to the cross-regional mail list on August 5th, 2024. The Contract Implementation Committee had 7 new findings reports for providers of telecommunications-related services. Those are the PTRS users that are non-service providers, and that's to validate the need for NPAC data access, and those were received and approved since the last NANC meeting. Under other NAPM activities, the Security Advisory Committee, in conjunction with iConnective, completed a data center site visit and security review. iConnective has successfully implemented the changes for the new NAS interface, and the data center rebuild is currently in progress with initial communications about the new data center that's being sent to mechanized system users, low-tech interface portal users, vendors, and all users and PTRS users on October 8th. Finally, the responses to the RFI and RFQ have been received, and a report for the FCC is currently being developed. The NAPM LLC role is to provide oversight and management of the local number portability administrator in accordance with the contract orders and or direction from the FCC. We have contact information available for myself and Teresa. Our NAPM does meet monthly, and a portion of each meeting is open for attendance by any interested party. Our current meeting schedule is published on the NAPM LLC website at napmllc.org. That's the end of my report, and I'll turn it back to Chairwoman Charles.
Thank you, Deb. Next, we'll hear an update from Brent Struthers, Director of the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority. Brent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman Charles. Thank you on behalf of the STIGA. Thank you for allowing us to come and present before the NANC, give you guys an update. I can't believe it's December already, but if you, and I can't see the slide, so if you go to the second slide of the presentation, you can see that we've got, as of December 1, about 1,400, just shy of 1,400 service providers authorized. It's actually 1,396 service providers and 3 RESPORTs authorized to get SBC tokens so they can sign their calls. We did have a dip in September, October timeframe. As you can look at the little chart, you see that little V in there. We had a bunch of providers that were removed for non-payment and also failure to provide their 499A data. which of course they have to provide so that the STIPA can send out the bills on December 1, because they can't determine how much you're going to pay unless they know what your revenues are. So most of those providers were actually reinstated once they got removed, and they had gotten multiple notices before they got removed, but I guess it was that removal that was the final notice that said, hey, maybe you should either pay or provide your data. So most of them have been reinstated. We currently have 15 authorized STICAs, and of course, those are the entities that assign the actual certificates to the provider so they can sign their calls. So let's go to the next slide, please. This is the actual update. Since we last met with the NANC, since we last provided an update, the STIGA has put out a new version of the certificate policy. It was a minor update, so it's 1.4.2, not 1.5. We altered some language to allow for the issuance of a new certificate policy without having to change what's called the object identifier. And in short, every time we change that little object identifier number, it causes all of our 15 CAs to have to go back and make changes to their root certificate, which is a real difficult process. So we wanted to be able to make minor versioning updates to the CP without causing all that expense. And the language changes in the CP 142 allow us to do that. We also added some language that allows us to suspend a CA if they fail to adhere to the certificate policy. We could earlier in the earlier versions revoke their right to be a CA, but we thought, maybe we'd have some situations where we didn't really want to revoke, where we just suspend instead. So we added that language to the CP. That is kind of in line with some of the language we've added this year to the revocation policy and the reinstatement policy. We've had some complaints from state AGs this year against service providers. So in going through those complaints, we have noticed that, hey, we could probably tweak our revocation policy. We could probably tweak our reinstatement policies to make them easier to administer as we're going through the complaint. So we added language allowing for probation of a service provider without revocation. So some of the service providers we've talked to have said, hey, yeah, we made mistakes in terms of signing calls, and we've corrected that. Maybe we had a system issue that was signing calls with the incorrect level of attestation. So we've changed that process. So instead of revoking their certificates, since they made the change, we'd put them on a suspension if we kept having issues with them after the suspension was instituted, that we could bring them back a little bit more quickly for another review and then consider revocation. So we've changed the revocation policy slightly. We also added some language to the reinstatement policy to note for folks that, hey, if you're on suspension and you've been reinstated, and we get another complaint against your company, we're not going to cut you off right away. We're not going to revoke your certificate, your token right away. What we're going to do is check the evidence to make sure it's credible before we do that. And part of that checking of the evidence involves our going to you as a service provider that's been complained about and saying, hey, please tell us what happened. So the reinstatement policy has been reworded so it clearly says that we're going to take that process a little bit more slowly than it initially appeared. Policy compliance, the GA, the PA, the GA is trying to ensure policy compliance this year. So again, like I said, we've had a number of providers accused of improper attestation. Again, it's been from the state attorneys generals. And we've gone through that. We have actually revoked a couple of tokens. One has been reinstated. One was we were going to revoke and was actually pulled because the provider left the ecosystem essentially. So we've gone through a bunch of that this year. I suspect we'll probably have some more ongoing. In terms of framework funding, you might have seen the new fees that were posted in October. 2025 fees, the contribution factor is down from the prior year. Not a lot, but it's down. The maximum payments are down a little bit. The minimum payments are down as well. So we try and keep the payments roughly the same or keep them going down if we can, because we've got a few more providers participating now than we had last year. In terms of PA billing, again, we had 13 service providers removed from the list of authorized providers because they failed to pay they failed to provide the necessary 499A data. Again, a lot of those folks were reinstated after they actually provided the data. The last thing that I want to update y'all on is the GA and PA. That is the PA agreement with iConnective has been extended. We have a new agreement that goes from beginning of 2025 to the end of 2029. So it's a 5-year agreement with the PA with iConnective. And then Addis was re-upped as the GA administrator for another 3 years. Now, the reason we didn't do 5 years there, one of the reasons is that we wanted to make sure if there needed to be new RFP going out for iConnective for 2030 and beyond, that if you felt like they needed to replace Addis as the GA administrator, that would be done a couple years before that RFP would go out. So whoever the new entity is would be able to come in, get their feet wet, and have enough knowledge to do an RFP in 2020 at the end of 2029. So anyway, 5-year agreement for iConnective, 3 years for Addis. We're all very excited about that. And unfortunately, if Christy wishes, y'all got to hear from me for at least another 3 years. And that's the update. So I'll ask if anybody has any questions. Perfect timing. The Amazon guy's here and my dogs are going to bark. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent, for that report. For our final update, we'll hear from Phil Lindsay, co-chair of the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group, or the NAOWG. Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate that. My name is Philip Lindsay with Lumen. I share the co-chair role with Lara Walt from the Public Service Commission of the District of Columbia. You'll be hearing from her later with the NAOWG's report on the direct access. In addition to Lara and myself, we share this role with Karen Rippenkoger of T-Mobile. In addition, we have a couple of FCC liaisons, Jonathan Letcher and Rebecca Macaroni. Both of them provide us tremendous amount of support associated with the inner workings of the FCC and the government agencies' efforts to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time and have all the right things reviewed. So there's a lot of work that goes along in the background associated with their liaison efforts. So I want to thank the FCC liaisons for all the work that they do. The next slide, area of responsibility. The Number Administration Oversight Working Group oversees the activities and reviews the performance of the North American Numbering Plan Administrator and the Billing and Collections Agent. It also provides oversight of Number Portability Administration and the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator. The FCC contract oversight has a couple of vendors. The first one is Somos, and they are the North American Numbering Plan Administrator and the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator. The North American Numbering Plan Administrator administers the allocation of the North American Numbering Plan numbering resources. This includes the allocation of 1,000 block number pooling, and then the routing number administration or PANI number resources, and then the 10,000 code numbering resources. The Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator, it's almost as the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator, or the RNDA. They administer the data that is provided into the RND and the service that is provided to the callers, so those that query that database. And then our second vendor is the Billing and Collections Agents, and it's provided by Welch LLP. Welch LLP performs the billing collection agent functions by billing and collecting of the telecommunications industry for payment of the functions of the BNC agent, the NAMPA pooling administrator, and RNDA vendors. In addition, the NAOWG has oversight of number portability, and I'll have a slide on that with the Number Portability Industry Forum, or the NPIF. Contract status. So the NAMPA and RNDA, the Somos.gov Inc. Awarded the combined NAMP and RNDA contract, and it was effective December 1st of 2020, and it expires in November 30th, 2025, for a total of 8 years. The BNC agent, the contract awarded to Welch in July of 2024. That was a 3-year duration, and it was 3 years in duration. Expiration is July 31st of 2027, plus 2 1-year extensions ending July 31st, 2029. It's hard to believe that we're entering contracts that are 2029. It's just mind-boggling how time flies. But anyway, so with the NAMPA readout for NAMPA, in our normal review, we have monthly reports. We review the North American Numbering Plan, the pooling administration, and the routing number administration. The NAMPA contract includes combining the number administration system, or the NAS, the pooling administration system, and the routing number administration, or RNAS, into a single system. Previously, those were separate contracts. It was recommended previously by a NANC working group that those systems be combined to create efficiencies, and the latest contract for the NAMPA included that combining of those systems. So we further then completed the monthly and quarterly evaluations, and then associated with that combination of those systems, we launched, or the Somos launched that combined system on October 28th of 2024. And if you gave the NAMPA website, if you want to learn more about NAMPA, on the next slide, we will move into kind of the details of the combination and the launch of that new system. So pre-NAS, or what they called CNAS, it was a combined number administration system launch. Training was held between September 12th, 2024 and October 17th of 2024, covering the NRUF applications and Part 4s for CO codes and 1000 blocks, KICS, 5XX, NXXs, PANIs, and NAMPA website. The NAS MPAC API interface testing was completed as of September 24th of 2024. The new NAS then launched on October 28th of 2024. Post-NAS, or CNAS launch, there were 11 track trouble tickets related to the new NAS between October 28th and October 31st. And they were reported on the NAMPA October report. Other issues identified were screen formatting, unable to query without having to input date, range, names and profiles that were unknown to the user. And those are just examples of some of the issues that were identified, and they were, of course, resolved. BIRD's mechanized interface is still being reviewed and discussed with the FCC. The BIRD's mechanized interface, that's significant in that it upon implementation of that mechanized interface, it would take out the potential for human error, and that has some implications of routing of calls across the network, as providers are looking at and the BIRDS is the input into the LERG, or the Local Exchange Routing Guide, And so mistakes in that can then potentially have routing implications. So that mechanized interface would help create some efficiencies there and remove some potential for human error. The NAMPA website, again, if I have the URL for that below, and if you're interested in learning more about NAMPA, you can go to that website. The next slide is the RNDA, and it's our monthly review of the RNDA monthly reports. We provide service providers upload data, their data by the 15th of each month. The service provider data upload as of October 2024. We've got approximately 491 million numbers in the RNDA or in the RND or with the reassigned numbers database, including toll-free numbers. Approximately 25 million disconnected numbers are reported on a monthly basis. And that fluctuates from month to month, but generally it's around 25 million. And then we've got about 1,100 service providers and service provider agents registered in providing data into that reassigned numbers database. And then we finally completed our monthly quarterly evaluations, and we typically read those out on a quarterly basis in our monthly meetings. The RNDA websites, if you would like to learn more about the RND and the RNDA, you can find those on the RNDA website as well as the FCC's website. Finally, from a contract oversight perspective, we have the billing and collections agents, or Welch LLP. I'm sorry. We reviewed the BNC agent reports. We review the monthly deliverables, perform a monthly and quarterly evaluation, review the NAMPA financials and the R&D financials. And if you need to learn more about the NAMPA Fund, you can go to the NAMPA Fund website, which is managed by Welch at that URL. Finally, we have the Number Portability Industry Forum, or the MPIF. The MPIF continues to meet on a monthly basis with focus on general L&P issues, including XML interface improvements, porting throughput increases, LSMS capacity planning, best practice updates, and change order review. Examples of active issues currently being worked are the PIM 154, or the pseudo LRN 1000 blocks and SPID migrations, and the PIM 155 for pooled TN modifications, and a new PIM on calculating SV counts for SPID migrations. The chairs are Deb Tucker with Verizon and Teresa Patton of AT&T. And if you need to learn more and find meeting agendas and meeting notes and meeting times, you can visit the MPIF website at the URL I listed there. And I think that pretty much wraps it up for the readout of the activity since our last NANC meeting. This slide has all of the members of the NAOWG, and I wanted to thank each of them for their participation in our monthly meetings. They're fairly lengthy meetings. They're 2-hour meetings on a monthly basis, and we move through a lot of information in that amount of time. And I just appreciate everybody's participation and interest in understanding, how all of this works and, the benefits to the industry in overseeing these functions. So with that, the last page there is then identifying the next meetings or the remainder of the meetings this month, which is on the November 19th, and then the tentative meetings that we've identified for 2025. It looks like I have a little typo there on November. I have November twice, and it should be December. And I'm not sure why that date is there, but anyway, it gives it that, and that's all subject to change. So apologize for that.
No worries.
With that, I can turn it back to the chair unless there are questions. I guess we can open it up for questions.
Are there any questions?
I don't see any hands.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Chairwoman. Sure. Thanks.
Bill, thank you so very much for that update. And I do want to say, I agree with you. Time is flying by really fast. For our first report for the council's consideration, we'll hear from the Internet of Things, or better known as IoT, Numbering Usage Working Group regarding the feasibility and advisability of transitioning to IoT device usage of North American numbering plan numbers to alternative addressing. The viability of potential options. This report will be presented by the two co-chairs of this working group, Susan Gately and Rich Shockey. Susan and Rich, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I am going to, Susan, I'm going to start and I'm going to hand this over to Rich in just a little bit. We can go on to our first slide. Our working group met for over a year on this issue, and we had a wide range of expertise on the working group. Enterprise customers, wireless carriers that actually provide the IoT services, traditional carriers, non-traditional carriers, state regulators, technology companies, numbering administrators. We really had as much expertise in the numbering area, I think, as you could have brought to this issue. And I want to begin this by thanking everybody so much. This group worked really hard. We met bi-weekly and then, weekly for over a year, with frequently work being done in between those meetings by members of the group. So I really want to thank everybody getting started. I also want to point out that the expertise of this group is in numbering, and some of what was tasked to us probably went a little bit beyond what required numbering, expertise in numbering. So we worked very hard. We struggled through this, but I think we've come up with a useful report and some interesting options for the commission to consider going forward. Without disclosing any of the deliberations that went on within our group, I will say that there were strong opinions on a lot of the issues that we discussed. We did manage to come to resolution of them, and we're are happy to be able to present this report. But we were definitely hampered throughout this and spent quite a lot of time trying to understand what the volume of IoT numbers were, what they were used for, what the future was going to look like, because there is very, very little public data out there on this subject. So at least half of the year that we worked on this, I would say we were exploring the issue. So that is my introductory, position. I'm going to turn this over to Rich now to discuss the report itself with you. Next slide.
All right, next slide, please. All right, folks, thank you, Susan. I mean, it was a long year trying to get through all of this one way or other, but this is just reviewing what the Wireline Competition Bureau sent to us as the charge letter. So to sort of review this, generally, the concern in the Wireline Competition Bureau has been the potential exhaust of the NAMP itself because of the proliferation of IoT and machine-to-machine devices here. So the question was, for our working group is, how do you, what can be done and what kind of recommendations can you make? And to emphasize from Susan, the problem that we had was getting a firm grasp on data. Since most of the data is proprietary among consultants in the IoT industry, we simply did not, we could not put in the report data that we could not quote or approve of. But though in general, we think, at least I think, and Susan agrees with me, that we think the IoT market for NAMP numbering is about 250 million devices today. Okay. We think that's about right. We do have some data that the fine folks at Maine PUC were able to provide. They actually went into the 10K filings of AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, and again, one of the market success stories for the wireless carriers has been fixed wireless access. So we actually do know that there are 15 million FWA access points out there today out of an addressable market of potentially 45 million. So the key that we quickly looked at was how do you segment data only addressing from what would necessarily be telephony, namely voice and or SMS. So the next slide. The charge letter did not provide us with a charge to make formal recommendations. However, in the 4G, 5G, and ultimately 6G environment, what we were ultimately dealing with was coming up with something that the existing OSF operational support systems and business support systems could accommodate, because we want our wireless carriers to be successful and properly bill for services rendered. So in some way, shape, or form, we were looking at something that was compatible with E164, which is the international standard for telephone numbering, which is essentially 15 digits. Okay. So the options that we have put forward is in some way a variation on that, which is +1, which is of course the North American country code, and 14 digits, which would require modifications to the MC related AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting for these kinds of services, one way or the other. And we quickly focused on that. And one of the things that we quickly found out and were alerted to was our Canadian brethren in Ottawa and the Canadian carriers had been also studying pretty much the exact same problem for over 2 years. And we quickly zeroed in on their report. And I have to say, and this is my personal opinion, I think the Canadians did an absolutely outstanding job, to the point where all of our members in our working group basically agreed that we are attaching to our report the Canadian report verbatim. So it's the Canadian Steering Committee on Numbering, which directly reports to CRTC. And the Canadians, to my knowledge, have not yet made a formal determination on exactly what they're going to do. But it seems to be we're all working in a parallel methodology. So something either subordinate or adjacent for essentially 15 digits seems to be the consensus that the options that we want to put forward. Okay. We did look at one other option, which is it is actually possible for the North American Numbering Plan to get a new country code that could be IoT specific. I personally checked with some of my colleagues at that work with ITUT, Study Group 2, and it is possible, but that is, of course, we just put it in as an option for the FCC and the industry to consider one way or the other. So, next slide, please. So, again, most all of what we have done is look at how IoT devices are used. Now, the marketplace, again, as we pointed out, is moving relatively quickly. We've looked at fixed wireless broadband. Now, every single solitary car and truck sold in North America has the potential for an eSIM. We know that. So you're talking millions and millions of devices that are out there that could possibly utilize NAMP resources if there's not some change to be made. In addition to that, the utility industry is moving towards 4G, 5G, and potentially 6G connectivity as well. So this means every electric meter, every gas meter, every water meter in some developments will be 4G, 5G, 6G enabled in some way, shape, or form. And needless to say, in our own neighborhoods, the proliferation of trail cameras and street cameras, especially in front of schools, is ongoing quite a bit, so that the marketplace for these IoT devices continues to expand one way or the other. So next slide. We looked at we very, very quickly deprecated the idea of an alternative addressing space that could potentially contain alphanumeric characters. And we were looking at alternatives that basically were at least reasonably compatible with the existing infrastructure to potentially go into a de novo addressing space for IoT M2M application. We were convinced very quickly that the cost to the industry would be absolutely cost prohibitive. It would be almost in the range of what the industry had to go through with local number portability in the early 2000s. So the idea of maintaining some compatibility with the existing infrastructure was a primary goal of our presentation of options. So again, we were very sensitive to the potential cost to the industry on any radical new proposal here. So that's why we did not look at new alphanumeric addressing schemes. And personally, I've been involved in technical standardization for almost 30 years, and to start a process like this for the industry, well, it would just take perhaps a decade. And I don't think realistically the commission or the industry is prepared to go through that kind of process. So next slide, please. Okay, so how do we, the general theory that we came to was cap the existing use of telephony-based NAMP numbers now, or certainly in some way, in some time frame, and ultimately go through a formal NOI or rulemaking process about this sort of stuff, and then grow the addressable namespace into plus 114 at an appropriate time. So this idea of cap and grow is something we had very good consensus on, and what the policies would be associated with that. How would this new plus 114 namespace be coordinated, and how would it be administered? That is necessarily going to have to be a formalized rulemaking process. And we made no recommendations on how that would potentially be done. So there are, next slide, please. There are other things that the working group wanted to do, which is potentially reporting in some way, shape, or form, and internal audits on how blocks are being utilized. That was, in fact, somewhat contentious. How that would ultimately be done. And, the other thing is all of these, our recommendations combined with CATA and NAOWG is going to basically require a large-scale rethink of how numbering is done in the United States. So that's all I have. Next. Any questions?
Rich, this is Karen.
Yeah.
A question that I have. Did you, you said that you attached the report from Canada onto your report?
Yes.
And that they did a great job. I'm wondering, did you communicate with them at all? Did you interact with the working group in Canada?
Well, well, yes. However, I did not have any discussions about our deliberations.
Okay.
Full disclosure, I've been a contractor to CRTC in the past. I know the Canadian Numbering Administrators. Inc., by the way, was monitoring the situation in Canada quite often, one way or other, which is how we sort of knew what was going on there, one way or other. So they have been in touch with me, though I have not been in touch with them. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
They've been in touch with me. They are very curious about this report, by the way, that we have done.
I'm sure.
And as soon as we vote on it, I certainly am it'll be public at that particular time, and I'm going to make it available to them. They are doing a supplemental report to CRTC by March 25th of 2025. The reason for that is CRTC had some questions for the Canadian Numbering Administrators and clarifications on what they were going to do. It's not a wholesale revision, by the way. It's more clarification, and that supplemental report will be available. Hopefully, we can make it available to Nancy when it's available.
That's great. No, we're looking forward to seeing that. And just two more questions. I hope we thanked them for their very complete and succinct and very accurate report. It sounded like their report was fantastic. That's why you included it in yours. So again, I hope we complimented them. And hopefully they will do the same once we release it.
I guarantee you that will come up. I guarantee. Again, they did they really did a great job.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And then the last question I had was the new country code. It sounds like that would then open up every phone number, make every phone number available all over again for IoT purposes. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, like I said, the process actually, okay, because this is the NAP, okay, to request, and this is +1, to request a brand new country code would undoubtedly entail a coordination between the FCC, Department of State, the Foreign Ministry of Canada, and a consultation with the other members of the NAP one way or the other. It is possible. Actually, ITUT has a specific country code dedicated to IoT that anyone can potentially use, but given the scale of the potential applications in North America, it was an option. I don't think we need it. I don't think we'll need it. I think +114 because that allows us to do things in the numbering space that we would not have considered. Say, for instance, using 0 or 1 in the NPA itself. Okay. So one of the options that the Canadians had pointed out would be, okay, we'll talk to the NAPA or whomever and get +1 0 1 2 as an IoT related NPA. Okay. And then you could go, okay, 0 1 3 0 1 4. You could also use the D digit then. And that would give, billions and billions of numbers that you could open up in that methodology alone. So, yes.
If I can just pull a little data from our report to put that into perspective. There's a table in the report that documents our best estimates of how many new numbers would be made available from the different solutions. And obtaining a new country code would open up about 1 trillion numbers, which is certainly a lot of numbers and should hold us for a long time. But our option 1 would produce probably 75 trillion numbers. Option 2 would free up about 80 billion numbers for each NPA. Option 2 presumes use of available NPAs within our existing system being turned over to IoT, but there would be roughly 80 billion numbers for each one of those. So it's the new country code is not necessarily give us the best numbers, and it's probably the hardest lift out of anything.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from any other members? I don't see any hands. Last chance. Nothing else.
Thank you, Christy. If this discussion is complete, I will now open the meeting for a vote to approve this report. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Rosemary Lice, T-Mobile, makes the motion to approve the report.
Great, thank you, Rosemary. And anyone for a second?
Phil Lindsay with Lumen, make the second.
Thanks, Phil. That's great. And with that second, we'll submit it to the council for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The NANC approves the report from the Internet of Things Working Group. Thank you so much, Susan and Rich, and all the members of this working group for your efforts. Motion passes. For our next presentation, we will again hear from the NAOWG as it submits its report on direct access. This report will be presented by Laura Howley-Walt, co-chair of the NAOWG. Laura, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Nancy members, and good morning, Chairwoman Charles. This is Laura Howley-Walt from the DC Public Service Commission, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the NAOWG, along with Phil Lindsay and Karen Rippenkroger. And our FCC liaisons are Jonathan Lecter, Rebecca Macaroni, and for this report, Jordan Reth, and we really appreciate all of their assistance in getting us through this report. Basically, the report, if we could go to the next slide, we started out with this report with the February 20th, 2024 charge letter, which came from the second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking. And in that order, the FCC sought to strengthen the Commission's rules regarding direct access to numbering resources by interconnected VoIP providers to assist in deterring illegal robocalls, protecting national security and law enforcement, safeguarding finite numbering resources, reducing the opportunity for regulatory arbitrage, and promoting public safety. And the FCC charged the NAOWG to investigate 10 topics related to number use, access, and reclamation by interconnected VoIP providers that have been granted direct access. And so, next slide. And the first question was, how do interconnected VoIP providers with direct access, how do they use numbering resources? And our report focused on how they use resources to provide numbers to large businesses to be used to contact customers with local geographic numbers. Research shows that people are more likely to pick up the phone if they see a caller ID with a local telephone number rather than an out-of-state or out-of-region number. We also discussed on how there's non-interconnected VoIP service provided, and also that interconnected VoIP providers provide wholesale and resale service to other providers. Next slide. And we also discussed the effects of direct access on number exhaust. Since 2015, when IPES providers were granted direct access, the quantity of CO code and 1,000 block number requests has increased steadily, leading to additional demand for numbering resources. One particular area is in the when a new entrant, such as an IPES provider, needs to obtain a local numbering number, an LRN in each LATA, in which they seek to numbering resources. And this accelerates CO code exhaust. But the industry has worked to try to reduce the need to open new LRNs in some circumstances. So that was discussed as well. And the next slide. The other effects of direct access, there are some benefits. End users have increased competitive choices with interconnected VoIP providers getting direct access to numbers. And also there's additional transparency on how numbers are being obtained and utilized, since IPES providers with direct access are required to report utilization and forecasting in NREF and other reports. Now the next slide. The FCC also wanted the NAOWG to look at what would happen and the effects if there's revocation of direct access to interconnected VoIP providers. And we had a lot of discussion about this, and we found some of the following effects would probably happen. There would be reduced transparency into utilization, since iVoIP providers would attain the numbers on the wholesale resale market instead of directly from NAMPA. Additionally, other telecommunications carriers would need to assume the administrative functions of any reclaimed numbers, which puts more burdens on other providers. End users could be affected if the service provider ends service. And then also industry guidelines might need to be updated so that their number reclamation rules would, they would have to be amended to deal with a larger number and complexity of revocations. Okay, next slide. The NAOWG looked at alternatives to revocation of direct access to address the number exhaust issues, and we noted that the ITN report that was adopted by the FCC in February 2023 provides several options for mitigating number exhaust. So we point everyone to that. We also suggest that entities that obtain numbers on the wholesale resale market should be required to comply with existing numbering rules and industry guidelines. And then broadening additional enforcement of existing numbering rules by the FCC and state commissions could possibly assist in these efforts. Okay, and next slide. Basically, our timeline was we got the report in February 2024, and we established weekly meetings to discuss all of these issues, because there were quite a few of them and they were wide-ranging. And then starting in October, we met at least twice a week to go through the report and refine our contributions. And then we submitted the final report on November 18th. And the last slide is just our membership, and Karen, Phil, and I really appreciate everyone's input. We had lots of long discussions. We had vibrant discussions, and I think we shared a lot of information and learned about different aspects of the industry and why there are increased needs for numbers right now. So I think the conversations were productive. We'd particularly like to thank Isaac Schloss of REACH, who helped facilitate our discussions and helped organize the outline and helped us through all of that, and Olive Morris from Telnix, who did a lot of our copy editing. And everyone else on the NAOWG, we thank you very much, because it was a long process, and we got to a good end. So are there any questions about our report?
Hi, Lara, this is Rosemary, and wow, you did a great job with that long report. You did a great job summarizing it. Thank you, and thank you to the NAOWG for putting this together. When we looked at it, once it was finished at a high level, we found something that I wanted to talk about today. I don't think it's going to be at all controversial. Just let me tell you that right off the bat. But I want to move to offer an amendment if I could. This is just a few friendly modifications to the draft NAOWG report. And it would just basically make sure that the report aligns with the FCC's directive and scope to provide information related to number use, access, and reclamation by specifically interconnected VoIP providers. So this is just, yes.
Steve, before you go into the substance of it, I'd like to just explain to members how we will handle a proposed amendment to the report, because we don't, as you all know, we don't have these very often. So I'd just like to give you a procedural explanation on how we'll do this so that everybody understands where we're going. Is that okay? Rosemary, is that okay if I jump in now for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay, and then we'll come back to you to discuss it substantively. So members, as you know, we don't normally have this sort of thing. So the way that we're going to handle this is T-Mobile, Rosemary on behalf of T-Mobile is going to propose their amendments to the working group report. She will explain why. Members will have an opportunity to ask questions, discuss. Once the discussion on the amendment is complete, we will put it to a vote. We'll do it by yays and nays like we normally do. If there are nays, we will do a roll call vote. Then after all this, then, we'll open it up to discussion of other issues that other members have. When all member discussion is complete, we will do a vote on the entire report that will either include or not include the T-Mobile edits depending on how that vote went, first vote went. But we will have a vote at the end on the entire report. And then we will do yays and nays, but if there are nays, we will do a roll call vote on the entire report. Does anybody have any questions about that procedure? Okay, I'll be here to help guide that as we go along. Rosemary, back to you on the substance of your proposed edits.
Okay, thanks. And I promise this will be quick. So in a few limited places, I think there's 5 different places, the draft report makes references to text messages, and they're references in ways that we don't think fit the FCC's direction to the NAOWG to focus the report on that's supposed to be focused specifically on interconnected VoIP providers. So text messaging is an information service. It's not an interconnected voice or telecommunications service. So the draft report's definition of a call to include text message starting on page 25. So this is in the Appendix A glossary section. It says call to include text message. We feel like that's inconsistent with the classification. And if it's adopted, it would create confusion on how the report findings and recommendations apply in the text messaging ecosystem. So we feel like removing text from, so on page 25 and 26 under the glossary, the call is defined as a call or a text message. We would simply ask that we remove or text message. And then on the very bottom of the glossary where it says text message and electronic message sent using SMS, MMS, or RCS, we'd like to ask to have that removed. There is limited reference. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, Rosemary, this is Karen. So how would we address text messaging if we're removing it?
Well, text messaging is, we really just don't believe that this particular report is, since it's under, since the report is telling us and the FCC is directing us for interconnected VoIP providers, we don't feel that text messaging
falls into that category.
Falls into that category, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah.
It's really stemming from the verbiage from the FCC to the working group that didn't include text messaging. So you're saying it shouldn't be included in the report. Okay.
Yeah, and it's only in a couple of places, and we just feel like we should limit that context a little bit. And I'm sorry we didn't catch this earlier, or didn't have a lot of time to get with everyone to talk about this in advance. But in any event, let me finish. So, let's see, on page, let me go through on page 13 and the other 3 are, I've lost my page here. Okay. On page 13, there's another spot where it says, similarly, the same call center can send the customer a text or call updates. So we just like to remove the word text, simple. And then on page 13, again, there is a sentence that says, conversely, limiting numbering resources to strictly the physical location of the caller has been shown to have negative repercussions of the business calling those areas, which could have not only negative economic impacts on the business, but can also prevent consumers from receiving vital calls or text messages. We would just like to remove or text messages. Very, very simple. And then the last edit would be the for example section on page 12. There's a for example section that talks about the text messages, and I'll read it because we'd like to just delete this because of the references to text messages. And for example, in the state of Louisiana, text messages to cellular numbers for marketing purposes require prior express written consent regardless of technology utilized, and there are no exemptions for established business relationships, EBR. Conversely, California and Rhode Island only allow those same communications when there is an EBR. There are no clear allowances for any other sort of consent to be given, including prior written consent. And then further, we'd just like that. We'd like to delete that part. And then one thing right after that is just, while likely not performed through calls that violate state regulations may infringe upon the consumer. So we just want to add the word state regulations because state wasn't there, and add the word may after that. May infringe upon the consumer protection rights of those called. So it's basically just removing the reference to text in those 5 small places in this report. And further, we think that modifying the draft report as I outlined would align with the would better align with the FCC's direction and scope to the NANC on this project.
So this is Karen again. Laura, removing the word text or words text messaging from those 5 locations in the report, do you think that waters down the spirit of what you were trying to get at?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It doesn't change the major recommendations that the NAOWG presented in the report.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions on that, concerns, discussions on the TMO recommended edits or proposed edits?
Sorry to make it a roll call vote, but I'm going to say right now Epic is going to vote nay on this.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll go straight to a roll call vote. Did you want to talk about your view, Chris?
I don't want to get too deep into it right now, but the thrust of it is basically there have been a lot of issues with the scope of the charge letter that I disagree with, and this is just one more late-breaking one.
Okay. And does anyone else have any comments or discussions? No. Okay, well then I think we probably just need to go to a vote. Chairwoman Charles, are you ready to go to a vote? If so, it's going to be a roll call vote at Epic's request. So I'll just go ahead and start that.
That's okay. Fine, and that's totally fine with me. We're doing, just for clarification, we're doing a roll call vote on the amendment, correct?
Right. We'll do a roll call vote on the amendment, and then we will. Sounds like we'll probably have to do a roll call amendment on the full report as well. But right now, we are only addressing the proposed amendments from T-Mobile.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So
excuse me, sorry about that. This is Tracy Nayer for NAG. Is this just within the working group, or is this for the full Nancy. I just for the roll call, I'm just trying to clarify whether it'd be helpful to hear from the working group whether they support these amendments in their entirety before it's presented to the full group.
So we have, I think at least two co-chairs on. The co-chairs are welcome to address that if you'd like. And then if we have any members of the working group on who would like to address it, you're welcome to address it as well. But this, just to clarify, Tracy, this report has already been voted by the working group, so it's now at the NANC level. So the NANC would be voting now to include or exclude those proposed edits from the report. But we will still have a vote on the full report following this. That makes sense?
Yes.
This is Lisa Jill Freeman. I'm a member of the group. Is it possible for me to have a moment?
Of course.
Thank you. I don't agree with the edits as proposed because VoIP is also an information service, and in most instances of definitions, calls include messaging, certainly does as defined in the NPAC, and I would prefer an opportunity for this to be sent back to the working group to resolve as a group rather than to consider the edits here at this moment.
So this is Rosemary. I just wanted to say something about that. So the FCC found that a text message is a call in the limited context of its TCPA rules, but the determination does not carry over to the FCC rules and regulations, such as numbering administration. So defining a call as a text message in the context of evaluating numbering issues could create unnecessary confusion.
Well, I think it's a little splitting hair stuff, but it is an information service, and voice numbers can be enabled for messaging. And I think it's important to know, for the audience to know that that's capable on voice telephone numbers.
Hi, this is Courtney Tallarico from CTIA. My understanding is that interconnected VoIP has specifically not been classified by the FCC, and certainly not been classified as information service. And then also just want to reiterate Rosemary's point, and we believe that this is, of course, an important issue that requires and requires further discussion, but did not think that it was appropriate for this report, specifically given the charge focusing on the important issue of interconnected VoIP providers, use of numbers. So I think happy to answer any other questions related to the authority there.
I'll just quickly jump in. This is Greg Rogers, and I would say, Courtney, I agree with you on the legal kind of position there that you just articulated. Nevertheless, numbers are used, right, for messaging services, right? And so the inclusion of and reference to messaging as it relates to use of numbers seems appropriate, irrespective of legal classification between the two services.
Thank you. This is Courtney Tallarico again. That's right. However, the question of whether text messaging is subject to the FCC's numbering rules, we believe is a question for another report. Thanks.
So Tracy Nair, I see your hand. You've been trying to get in. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, when we had this issue with the last report, for instance, for the CATA working group, and there were proposed edits. Those edits were then essentially sent back to the working group to consider and work through. And I just wanted to ask if we could, again, propose that this gets sent back to the working group so that there can be some consensus and recommendation on this particular issue.
This is Jeff Lanning, Lightspeed. I would like to second that.
Okay, so
and
we
this
have
is Lisa Jill Freeman. Thank you. That was my original request.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a motion and a second to refer these proposed edits back to the working group for further deliberation.
Quick question. This is Courtney Tallarico, CTIA. Yeah. When Rosemary made the offer to put forward the amendment, initially, I understood that that was in the context of making a motion to vote on the amendment, which I was prepared to second that vote. We'd really like to see the report go to a vote today. I know there's been a lot of hard work on this issue and on the issue of just the report in general, I should say. So to the extent that folks are prepared to vote today, we would be happy to do so.
Okay, so let's, it sounds like some members want to go to a vote. It sounds like some members want to vote on referring it back. So let's do a vote on the first motion that was proposed was for an amendment from T-Mobile. Was that seconded? Did I hear someone second that?
We didn't offer a second, but someone just mentioned that they would have seconded.
Yeah, CTIA I know was prepared to second it. Looks like Michael Johnson has raised his hand. Michael?
Yeah, I just have a question. I just want some clarification if anything is like factually wrong with the information included in the report that is providing some consternation to a few right now. I raise that point because if there's something factually wrong, then I think that would completely merit some additional edits. On the other hand, my understanding is from working on this report is that the chair has tried really hard to really narrow the focus to the charge letter. That said, I think there is wiggle room or discretion by the chairs or the working group if everybody's in agreement on the substance of what's contributed. So I just want to raise that as a final point maybe to this question, that if something is factually inaccurate, then most certainly we should change it. If it's just something that people don't agree with right now, then to have in, but it's still factually accurate, then maybe it should stay.
Courtney?
Thank you. On the question of factual inaccuracy, I think there's sort of two ways that we were thinking about this. The first is in the definition of a call. This maybe is a bit more legal accuracy than factual, but nonetheless, our understanding is that the FCC only currently has found that a text message is a call in the limited context of its TCPA rules. That's at the direction of Congress. This determination does not necessarily carry over to other FCC rules and regulations, and there's several different contexts, including public safety rules, 988, 911, where that same call and text conflation does not apply, as it does in the TCPA context. So defining a call as a text message in the context of evaluating numbering issues could create some confusion from our view. And then the second spot is just in the that section on examples of state laws on page 12. CTIA is unfortunately not a member of this working group, so didn't have the opportunity to review those until this was made available to the full NANC, so haven't had a chance to dive into those state laws. But it appears those laws are being referenced to demonstrate that certain legitimate calls are being mislabeled as illegitimate, which could, of course, contribute to the overall problem of number exhaust that we're all looking at here. However, we don't believe that the reference to text messaging in those laws is simply relevant to the overall report here. Not saying that those state law examples are necessarily inaccurate, just that the doesn't relate necessarily to the overarching charge here to focus on calls and VoIP providers. Thanks.
Okay.
This is Greg Rogers. I will just
wait.
Okay.
Susan Gately's next.
I have a very quick question. I'm wondering whether this issue was, I don't know if you can talk about the deliberations, but is this an issue that went through? Has this already been discussed within the working group? And what we're seeing here is a decision by the working group to specifically include text in the language, even though there was dispute about it? Or is this something that hasn't been discussed heavily within the working group?
Well, this is Lara. The report was discussed by the whole working group. We had different contributors. We went through the report. I mean, I won't say what the nature of the deliberations was, but we did discuss the contents of the report.
And it was and it was voted unanimously.
No, it wasn't. But there was one abstention, but it was
there
voted.
was one abstention.
Yes.
Yeah. There were no dissents, right?
There were no dissents.
Thank you.
Greg?
I just would go back to kind of my earlier point, which is, you know, the FCC has spoken in various contexts to the existence and the fact that, you know, interconnected text, interconnected messaging, interconnected SMS exists, right? We use telephone numbers for messaging services. The inclusion and a reference to that fact, that's part of the consideration of what's happening with telephone numbers in the United States seems important. And so, you know, a last minute exclusion on a sort of narrow legal jurisdictional basis just doesn't seem necessary at this time.
Okay, Jeff Lanning?
Yeah, so listening to this, obviously there are two groups of people, there are two positions here that feel that these particular small changes are important. Both, you know, they don't agree that they should be made, but they both feel it's important. I don't think that the broader Nancy, at least certainly not myself, have had enough time to sort of understand that question of importance, and I don't feel comfortable being put in a position of voting on it, to be honest with you.
Okay, so I think this is a little different procedurally. Anybody else before we go on to the next? Okay, so I think this is procedurally different than what we had in June with Verizon, because Verizon put forward a motion to refer it back. They didn't have a motion to amend in the same way that T-Mobile does now. So I think what we need to do is we need to vote on the amendment. It sounds like we have quite a few members who are not comfortable voting for that amendment today. But I think we need to vote it, see if it carries among the members or not. If it does, it'll be included in the full report that we'll vote on next. Members have the option both on this amendment and on the full report to support it in full. Yep.
Christy, this is Rosemary. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to move to retract my amendment because I really did not expect there would be any pushback. So I'll just retract it and let's just move forward. The group did a great job on this report. I don't want to have to see the group rehash anything. Thank you.
Okay, so then T-Mobile
is withdrawing the amendment.
Its motion to amend. In light of that, is there still a motion to refer it back to the group, or can we go forward with a vote on the full report?
This is Rosemary. I would like us to go forward with a vote on the report. Thank you.
Okay. I heard earlier someone made a motion though to refer it back to. Are we retracting that now?
I will retract my second to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll retract the initial, the request for referral then.
Okay. All right, then that issue seems to be resolved. Thank you for everyone for your cooperation on that. Is there any discussion on this report on any other matter other than the retracted amendment? Okay, I don't see any. So then I think we should go to.
I'll just move towards the vote.
Yeah, let's go to the vote. We'll do yays and nays. Members who have continuing concerns, have the option to dissent or dissent in part. And if we do have any nays, then we will do a roll call.
Okay.
Vote. Okay.
Oh, okay, perfect. So if the discussion is, Thank you. So if the discussion is complete, I will now open the meeting for a vote to approve this report. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Lumen.
Bridget Highline, I motion to approve.
Say your name again, please.
Bridget White, Highline.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you very much. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone to second the motion?
Phil Lindsay with Lumen will second.
Thank you, Phil. And with that second, we'll submit it to the council for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Any nays? The NANC approves the report on direct access presentation by the NAOWG. For our final two items, we have reports from the Call Authentication Trust Anchor, or the CATA, the CATA working group. First, we will hear a report on direct access to numbers by interconnected voice over internet protocol, or VoIP providers. This report will be presented by Linda Vanderloop, co-chair of the CATA working group. Linda, finally, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so the CATA working group was asked to basically, well, there were a lot of different issues, so I'm going to go through them all. But to do a report on foreign originating calls and the use of indirectly obtained numbers, as well as numbers supplied on a trial basis. So specifically, we looked at the use of numbers obtained on the secondary market in the U.S., the use of U.S. NAMP numbers for calls that originate abroad and terminate in the U.S., the specific number usage restrictions already in place abroad, and on the likely effect of similar commission action on providers, consumers, businesses, and illegal robocallers, the practice of direct access authorization holders supplying telephone numbers to customers on a trial basis, the use of such trial basis numbers to engage in illegal robocalling, spoofing, or fraud, the potential effect on direct access authorization holders in the event of a commission prohibition on providing numbers on a trial basis, and the effect of supplying telephone numbers to customers on a trial basis on numbering resource exhaust. So next slide. This was a very collaborative effort on a very complex set of questions, which resulted in what we believe are recommendations that, if implemented, would make a start at improvements to the gaps that we had identified in the process. So I will go over and discuss some of all of the recommendations that we made in the report. Recommendation number one, to improve NRUF reporting compliance. The FCC should encourage providers to comply with existing reporting requirements, particularly in relationship to intermediate number administration and wholesale transactions. What was identified during the process was there's a lot of inconsistent reporting, and so focusing in on consistent reporting and application of the current rules would be helpful in providing the information that we need to evaluate the use of numbers. Increased access to numbering data. The FCC should work with the states to get access to additional data sources because the gaps in information really hamper the ability to both identify efficient number usage and prevent number exhaust, and also hamper the ability to identify use of numbers by the bad actors making illegal robocalls. Utilize the FCC auditing authority. The FCC should use its auditing authority to curtail any improper use of numbering resources and to identify any use of numbering resources. Enforce numbering rules strictly. The FCC should strictly enforce its numbering rules and thereby remind providers that failure to comply with industry guidelines and commission rules regarding numbering resources could result in revocation of authorization. The inability to obtain additional numbers pending revocation, reclamation of unassigned numbers already obtained directly from the numbering administrators, and or enforcement action. Improve call treatment. It was identified and discussed that some legitimate enterprises will get access to more numbers than they need for number rotation purposes because of the perception that their calls are being improperly labeled. So we recommend that the industry should adopt a goal of continuous improvement of ways a caller can be confident of proper call treatment of their calls so callers willingly use less numbers and less complex dialing plans. We concluded the commission should not adopt the international use restrictions. The limited international numbering restrictions that we had identified, described in the report, to avoid innovation, reducing competition, and slowing economic growth, but consider other CATA recommendations that we believe will better improve the use of numbers. What we had identified, the international restrictions were very prescriptive and a specific list of documents to identify the identity of the when providing numbers. They add burdens, especially to the smaller providers, and the bad actors can easily find ways to circumvent. So we really believe that the flexibility that we have in place now, as well as the additional recommendations for additional action, will go much further and be less burdensome. Endorse the ITG number traces if successful. So should the ITG's number trace pilot be successful, the FCC should formally endorse the ITG's use of number traces in its role as the registered U.S. Traceback Consortium and require providers to cooperate with such traces. And then follow best practices. The FCC should encourage providers with direct access to numbers to adopt general know your customer obligations regarding the use of numbers sold or leased to providers operating in the secondary market. So, for example, and this was a real education process for all of us, I think initially, some of us at least thought numbers used on a trial basis was a bad thing, and only the bad actors will use the numbers of trial basis because they use it for a short period of time and then move on. We learned very quickly that trial basis numbers are used very effectively to give consumers and businesses the opportunity to try out services before they actually purchase them. And it's a very, very positive thing for everybody. And so the recommendations included best practices or know your customer obligations rather than a recommendation to prohibit something that would benefit customers. So next slide. So I think there was a lot of education, a lot of discussion, a lot of some identification of some real gaps in the process and areas where more information would definitely help in many areas in compliant, monitoring compliance, monitoring for number exhaust, identification of illegal uses of numbers to make illegal robocalls. So, in the FCC's direct access order, the commission recognized the benefits of extending direct access to numbering resources to interconnected VoIP providers. And, the policy goals of counteracting number exhaust, ensuring continuance of efficient number utilization, and providing adequate safeguards to prevent bad actors from gaining access to numbers. But these benefits may be lacking in the secondary market. So the NRF reporting process offers valuable but incomplete window into the secondary market where numbers change hands through one or more intermediaries. So by improving the visibility into the reporting, regulators can better understand how numbering resources are flowing through the secondary market. The CATA working group believes that enhancing compliance with existing NRF obligations for intermediate number administration may provide insights needed to manage numbering resources. The CATA working group, next slide, just a summary of the meetings and the timeline. Next slide. The list of members, and everybody contributed. I mean, we just appreciate the very active participation by all of the members. In addition to the meetings listed on the previous page, there were many subgroup meetings to come to consensus on several very controversial issues, as well as a lot of data gathering for contributions. People worked long hours and made significant contributions, and I think we were able to come pretty much to consensus on all the issues and recognize that this is kind of a start of the process. We have identified a lot of issues that many of us or some of us were not that well educated on, and now that we are, we can continue to identify areas where we can make improvements. Special thanks on the next page to our FCC liaisons and staff, Eric Baith, Jonathan Lecter, Jordan Reth, Christy Schumann, and Ron Deline. And just listed the contact information for the co-chairs, myself and Jackie Woldemuth. And that concludes the reports.
Well, thank you, Linda. Do any members have any questions about this report? If there are no questions.
I don't see any hands.
Okay. I will now open the meeting up for a vote to approve this report on direct access to numbers by VoIP providers from the CATA working group. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Angela DeMay with AT&T, motion to approve.
Angela, thank you. Anyone to second this motion?
Susan Gately with ad hoc to second.
Thank you, Susan. We'll submit it to the council for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, the NANC approves the report on direct access from the CATA working group. For our final presentation, we will hear another report from the CATA working group, this one regarding the regulatory treatment of international cellular roaming traffic. This report will also be presented by Linda Vanderloop, co-chair of the CATA working group. Linda, back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, I am going to try and make up some time here since this is the second time around for this report. The CATA working group was asked to issue a report on whether or not international roaming traffic can be separately identified. If so, whether there should be a lighter touch regulation, and whether bad actors can take advantage of the lighter touch regulation. Would practices identified internationally be effective for the US, and we were asked to provide recommendations. So we can go to basically the third slide, because the first two were the charge letter. Next one. So the recommendations of the CATA working group recommends maintaining existing rules for roaming traffic as the cost for any change outweighs the benefits. We noted one of the things that is really different in several other countries is that they have separate wireless only number ranges where we do not. And so that possibly facilitates the ability to segregate and identify whether a number is roaming. The other thing that we have that they do not is we have a lot of requirements at the gateway to know our customers, to monitor the traffic, and we also have STIR/SHAKEN that is not in very many other countries. I think it's starting to be rolled out. So that's the reason for the recommendation. The other reason for the recommendation, and this is what the industry can do, transition to VoLTE networks for international roaming. And the reason we want to encourage a full transition is because calls roaming on VoLTE are treated like all other calls originating on the service provider's network. So the service provider knows whether or not the call should be roaming. The service provider knows whether, just like a domestic call, if the caller is authorized to use that number. So we want to encourage the transition. And then calls that are roaming on a 2G, 3G network are the ones that enter the US at the gateway. And those are the ones that are subject to the FCC rules that are in place, such as monitoring the network, knowing our customers. For the Commission, also to encourage transition to VoLTE networks for roaming, review the process for removing international providers from the robocall mitigation database. And, is there more of a process to report international providers that are sending bad traffic to the United States? What's the criteria? Is there anything different that needs to be done from the process that's to remove a domestic carrier from the robocall mitigation database? And then continue enforcement of existing rules. The results of the analysis, next slide. So some of the key points that we had identified: international cellular roaming traffic is not a significant source of illegal robocalls. Non-US providers transmitting international cellular roaming traffic were responsible for less than 10% of the tracebacks of suspected unlawful robocalls that identified a foreign service provider, according to the US Telecom Industry Traceback Group data. Identifying whether an international originated call using a number from the US NANC is from an international roamer will likely require technical solutions as are proposed or are in place outside the US. For example, proxy servers on roaming databases. And, the other point is that the number of calls that are not roaming on a VoLTE network is decreasing. So it's an actual shrinking number of calls that would have to be segregated. The US NANC does not have cellular only ranges. Networks using national numbering plans, which have dedicated cellular only number ranges are more likely to carry illegal robocalls since such calls using those numbers are protected from proposed blocking. While it's technically feasible to separate traffic at the gateway, the cost of doing so is likely far outweighs any of the benefits. The desired outcome is to protect calls which are likely legitimate and to block those calls which are likely illegal. Current calls that originate outside of the U.S. using NAMP numbers either route to the U.S. provider's network and are treated like all other calls originating on the service provider's network, or they are handed to a U.S. international gateway network, and that gateway provider meets the FCC obligations, including certification of its robocall mitigation plan in the robocall mitigation database, which further includes know your customer metrics. And next slide. You know, again, the CATA working group kicked off September 21st, 2023. We had many meetings in 23, 24. Additional meetings were held, but not included, to address the comments from the June 25th, 2024 NANC meeting and address the concerns raised by Verizon at that meeting. We had guest presenters providing information for consideration. Again, I thank the membership. In fact, maybe move to the next slide. Thank the membership for significant amount of research and education, as well as the willingness to work together on sub-work groups to resolve issues and to reach consensus. And then last page. Again, I just want to thank our FCC liaisons and staff for all the support. Had several questions that they had to go back and research and come back and give us some guidance. So thank you, Eric Byth, Jonathan Lecter, Jordan Rath, Christy Schumann, and Rhonda Lane. And that concludes the report on roaming.
Thank you, Linda. Do any members have questions about this report? Not hearing any questions, would anyone like to make a motion to approve this report?
Angela DeMay with AT&T, motion to approve the report.
Thank you, Angela. Anyone to second the report, second the motion?
Allison Blevins from Cinch will second the motion.
Thank you, Allison. That's great. We'll submit this report to the council for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none, the NANC approves this report on the regulatory treatment of international cellular roaming traffic from the CATA working group. Thank you to Linda and Jackie and all of the members of the CATA working group for your work on this issue. With that, the NANC has wrapped up all outstanding referrals to working groups and completes a highly productive year for the NANC. We thank you all. Going next, we will now open the floor up for public participation. We enable public participation through comments filed in the docket and through a dedicated email address. First, we'll turn to the comments filed in the docket. A public notice for this meeting released on September 27th, 2024, asked members of the public to file any comments in the Commission's electronic comment filing system in WC docket number 23-1. Christy, do we have any comments from members of the public?
No, we do not have any filings in the docket.
Thank you, Christy. Are there any public comments or questions received through the livequestions.gov email address?
No, we don't have any emails received either. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Christy. And lastly, do any NANC members have other business they wish to address? Hearing none. Christy, is there anything from the commission you'd like to add?
Yeah, we actually do have a few things. First of all, I think we had a couple of members join after the roll call. So do we have any members who would like to announce their presence on the meeting following the roll call? Who joined following the roll call? I think we have a couple. Chris?
Yeah, this is Chris Fischella at Epic Electronic Privacy Information Center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And did we have anybody from Comcast join?
Yeah, Beth O'Donnell here. I'm the alternate, so I was just listening in.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay, sounds like that takes care of the roll call. I had a couple of announcements for you. First, on behalf of the NANC staff, I'd just like to offer our thanks to the working groups, the co-chairs, the NANC members, and our council chairwoman and vice chairwoman for all of your work on the NANC this year. It's been a highly productive year. As you all saw today, there's been a lot of work done on the reports by these three working groups and also the toll-free working group that wrapped up their work earlier this year. So we want to thank everyone for all of your work on these reports throughout the year. And we appreciate all of your efforts. So we wanted to be sure to offer staff thanks before we wrap up here today as well. Now we're looking forward to the new year. We have not yet scheduled the NANC meetings for 2025. I also want to give you a heads up that the NANC charter expires in 2025. I know it seems like that comes around pretty quickly. Your terms as members of the NANC will run until early September. Historically, we have released a public notice seeking membership nominations in the March timeframe. And as you might recall, members who want to continue their memberships will need to submit new applications for consideration next year. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up about that will be coming at some point in the new year, and that you all, if you want to continue, you will need to submit full application packages as you've done in the past. We will keep you posted when we know more about the meeting schedule and the rechartering timing. We'll communicate with members after the beginning of the year as we know more. As always, the NANC staff is here to support your work, so please feel free to reach out in the meantime if you have any questions that we can help you with about the NANC or any activities for next year, but we will be in touch when we know more. Happy New Year to y'all, and I'll turn it back to Chairwoman Charles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Vice Chairwoman Alexandra White, anything you'd like to add to the meeting before we adjourn?
Yes, ma'am. I would just like to say thank you to all the working group chairs. You all did a tremendous job with these reports. I was a member of a lot of the working groups, and I learned a great deal in what I now call new to me areas of our industry. And I really, truly appreciate all the knowledge that I've learned from each and every one of you. And I look forward to next year to see what we're going to work on. And I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. If there is nothing else, I thank you all for your time. I wish you happy holidays, and we look forward to convening again in the new year for more important work on numbering issues. Our meetings for next year are not yet scheduled, like Christy said, but staff will let you know about scheduling when more details are available. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays, and have a wonderful weekend.